Hey, good day, world. Welcome to Upset Theology. I am so excited to be with you guys yet again. I'm always excited. I'm always going to say that because I'm always happy and I look forward to this time just to be able to bring some biblical knowledge and encouragement to your lives. This is episode 7 and we're on the run, man. I'm excited about today's episode because I'm going to get right into it. We were going to be doing Who is the Holy Spirit, but we are going to do that next week because I felt the urge to talk about a particular topic, which I'm going to bring up in a second. And you know, here at Upset Theology, I've said it before, I always have a structure as to how I want to teach and share with you guys. But here and there, if God tells me to or influences me to do something different, I'm going to do that. And then I'll get back to regularly scheduled program next week. But, it's not about me. It's about the people. And I've been feeling this unction to speak on this thing for the last almost 7 days. I actually taught on it on Sunday morning in Bible study, and I didn't want to leave you guys out because this is a larger audience, and it's a much more prevalent topic in general. I think it's safe to assume that everybody may have dealt with these particular feelings, and I will want to go as far as to say that there might even be a case where you might not necessarily recognize that you might be dealing with these feelings. There's times when a person may not recognize that this is what they're dealing with, but once it's brought into light, it's kind of made into a revelation that, hey, maybe I've been dealing with something like this. So let's get right in. We're going to be talking about abandonment, rejection, and feelings. And the reason why I even want to talk about feelings is interesting how, first of all, I'm going to put this disclaimer out there. I do not want to mismanage this topic. In other words, I don't want to generalize too much, so forgive me in advance. Also, I would like to be sensitive to people's feelings because people are really going through these things. And when I'm talking about people, I've experienced feelings of abandonment and rejection as well. And it went as far as Jesus. Jesus himself experienced these things, so which we'll get into a little bit later, but I just at least want to let you guys know that it is my intent to be fully sensitive to this topic. This topic could very well be very vast. I'm probably gonna keep it vague because you can almost apply this to so many different areas. Abandonment is not just father, son, or parent child relations, or same with rejection. There's so many different areas in which you can feel this on a daily basis. So that's why I want to dig in. And at the same time, there are times, let me see, I had it in my notes. There are times when you might be responding to these feelings of abandonment and rejection in ways in which you may not know. Like, if just for example, today for me, I had feelings of it was like I was a little annoyed. It was just like a feeling that overcame me while I was working, and I just kind of felt annoyed, and I just knew something was on me where I was like annoyed. I was, you know how there's the Snicker commercial where a person might be a big bear, and then somebody hands them a Snicker, and then they bite the Snicker, and then they kind of turn back to normal. So like Cranky, But yeah, that was the feeling I had. So the reason why I'm talking about that is because there's times you might be feeling a certain way, but you may not know that something is making you feel that way, or maybe you may not recognize that something is making you respond a certain way. And that's the same, I believe, for the feelings of abandonment and rejection might cause you to respond to life in a certain way. I heard earlier that the feelings of rejection and or abandonment might cause people to say that I'm no longer getting into the dating game. I don't want to be married again. I don't even want to talk to people. I don't want to talk to men. I don't want to talk to women. They're all no good. You know, those experiences of abandonment and rejection will cause you to respond a certain way towards all people. And in a sense, it's not necessarily fair, but I do understand how feelings of abandonment and rejection can cause you to kind of put up a wall and say, well, that's never going to happen to me again because I'm just not going to do it. So I understand that. But I do feel like it's very important to address these things because there's a lot of times when you may be disqualifying yourself from experiencing peace and or joy in ways that God may want to get it to you. But since you've experienced these feelings of rejection and abandonment, then you just no longer want to entertain the fact that it could be a possibility. You're like, no, 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 no. I don't want it. I'm good. But at the end of the day, even if you are not attempting to, I guess I would say, reconcile with these feelings for the sake of connecting with other people, do it for yourself. Don't do it for other people. Do it for yourself. It is important, to me at least, that I become happy for me. I don't want to become happy for you. I want to be happy for me. So throughout this episode, I want you to look within and focus on yourself. At the end of the day, the effects of the renewal of your mindset will eventually kind of it will affect the people around you. But internally, I want you to find peace and happiness within yourself, because feelings of abandonment and rejection don't often affect other people. It affects the person that feels rejected and feels abandoned. So let's dig in. I'm excited because I want you guys to find peace. Like this season, I've been saying it the last couple of episodes, I've been kind of exploring theology in areas as there's a statement that says the peace that surpasses all understanding. That's real, because people, with the things that people go through or that we go through, most would say, how can they still smile? How can they still give? How can they still offer? How can they still be nice? How come they didn't kill themselves? How come they didn't, end it all? And a lot of times we are seeing on the news, we are seeing the effects of people going through similar feelings. There might be more we might get into another day, but I do believe abandonment and rejection are causes to a lot of things that are going on around us. Now, if you agree, put something in the chat just to let me know that you guys are connecting. So let's go ahead and dig right into this. I just wanted to put lay a good foundation for what we're talking about today. So we're gonna begin with two definitions, which we're going to define abandonment. We're going to define it biblically and modernly, and we're going to define rejection biblically and modernly. So, abandonment. Biblical understanding of abandonment. In the Bible, abandonment often refers to a situation where individuals are left behind or deserted by others. For example, the story of Hagar in Genesis 16, which we'll get into a little later, it illustrates abandonment when Sarah and Abraham sent her into the wilderness along with her son Ishmael. It also it can also signify a feeling of being forsaken or neglected by God, as seen in Jesus' cry on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? Which is in Matthew 27:46. I believe we'll get into that as well. But as I often say, there's things that God or Jesus himself had to experience on earth to let us know that we can actually make it through these things as well. Modern day understanding of abandonment can encompass various situations where people are left without support or care, which abandonment, such as abandonment in relationships, emotional abandonment, or the feeling of being left alone in times of need. It can manifest in familial, which is family, romantic, which is like dating, or even professional context, and can result in emotional distress and a sense of isolation. So, as I said, I really wanted to bring this up today. I've just felt the burden this week to bring it up because I hear it throughout different conversations. And I would encourage you to just kind of see if you can recognize in different areas of your upcoming week where someone, even yourself, might be responding based off of an experience of abandonment. You don't have to point it out in people and say, oh yeah, I learned that you're dealing with abandonment. You don't have to do that. I just want you to see if you can recognize it in yourself and in others. Rejection. Biblical understanding of rejection. Rejection in biblical context often refers to the experience of not being accepted, valued, or embraced by others. For example, Joseph's rejection by his brothers in Genesis 37 illustrates this theme. Rejection can also signify the broader human condition of being estranged from God due to sin, as highlighted in passages like Isaiah 59:2. Your iniquities have made a separation between you and your God. So that's biblical rejection. Modern day understanding. In the modern context, rejection encompasses situations where individuals are turned away, dismissed, or not included in social, professional, or personal circles. Rejection. It includes rejection in friendships, job applications, romantic pursuits, or societal discrimination. Modern rejection can lead to feelings of inadequacy, low self-esteem, and emotional pain. So that last sentence is where I'm speaking as to how we might be dealing with these things and not necessarily recognize it. And as I said, in both cases of abandonment and rejection, it's not only in the romantic capacity. It's in family situations, professional context, and I believe there's one more, societal discrimination. So I had a thought earlier. Hopefully I can pull it back up. So the difference between abandonment, and this is just a basic contrast. So abandon is to leave behind. Rejection is to turn away. Abandon is to walk away, and rejection is to turn away. So there's a difference. Hopefully you guys can understand that, but there is a difference. So let's begin by examining how abandonment and rejection can manifest in our lives today. Now, I have a note here where I wrote down earlier that a lot of times it is my understanding, and if you agree, you can let me know in the chat. I put that I don't know where the assumption came where as people can grow out of pain. Meaning like, okay, just give it time, I don't know if I can agree with that as a full-on solution to overcoming these things. Just for example's sake, I think when I was having this thought, I was just thinking about an elderly person that might have gone through something in their childhood. So based off that statement of saying, hey, let age fix it, or let they can grow out of it. I've heard so many testimonies of elderly people in their 60s and 70s that are still hurting, and they would come into tears. They would cry while telling the testimony of what they went through as a child. So time alone can't fix it. You have to deal with some of these things. Let's see. Abandonment. A lot of times we hear stories, and you can assume, you can even assume that parents do abandon their children sometimes. There's children in the foster care system that might feel as, have those feelings of abandonment. And at the same point, there might be people who have both parents in the home that just feel abandoned, because that doesn't mean that they necessarily left. They just could be abandoning them in the home, in relationships. I have heard of different there are people that are in marriages where there's a partner that abandoned their mate in the same house. They come home every night, but they just feel abandoned. That's not cool. And I felt that before. I understand that. I'll even tell this story based off of something that happened many years ago, probably 12 plus years ago. I was in a particular relationship where I had a car, and I was coming from my job, and I turned this corner and I saw a couple sitting at the bus stop, and I was jealous because they were happy. Me, I'm driving a car. Them, waiting on the city bus. You would imagine, based off of your theoretic, your thought process of saying, oh, you have a car, you should be happier. But I wasn't happy because I saw them. They appeared to be happy, and they were sitting. I would have rather at that time. I would have rather be riding the bus if I could have had a relationship with somebody who actually felt like they wanted to be with me. So in a sense, I felt like I was dealing with abandonment in a relationship. At the same point, I'm also talking to the people who might be the ones that's doing the abandoning. I want you guys to just sit back and check yourself and see, am I abandoning my mate? Am I abandoning my kids? Do I come home and just watch Netflix while my kids are doing whatever they're doing? It's pivotal. It's important for you to recognize if you might be the one that's doing this. So let's pull up some biblical stories about abandonment. We talked about Hagar earlier, so let's turn to Genesis 16, chapter 16, verses 1 through 14. Now today I might be doing a lot of reading, but I don't necessarily like to just give you just a snapshot. I like to read the whole story so you can get an understanding. So Genesis 16, I went to the wrong chapter here. Verses 1 through 14. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. Okay? She had no kids for her husband Abram, but she had a slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her." All right, y'all see this, right? Abram agreed and to what Sarai said. So Abram had been living in Canaan for 10 years. Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian slave, Hagar, and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar and she conceived. So she had a baby. Follow the story. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. That's Abram's wife. Then Sarah said to Abram, "You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me." "Your slave is in your hands," Abram said. "Do with her whatever you think best." Then Sarah mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, "Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" She replied, I'm running away from my mistress Sarai." She answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her." The angel added, "I will increase your descendants so much that you will I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count." The angel of the Lord also said to her, "You are now pregnant, and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your misery. He will be with a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live hostily towards all his brothers." So let's see, 2 more verses. Now keep in mind, I do read at a certain pace because I don't want to skim across, certain points, because we're talking about abandonment, and hopefully you can already see where the abandonment happened. It was caused by, first of all, the wife of Abram, who had a sense of a desire. She wanted to give her husband a child, and so much so that she says, "Here, go sleep with my slave." But now that your slave is pregnant, you got a problem, and then now you want to, in a sense, reject her and abandon her. So this is but at the same point, you heard the story about where the angel stopped her in the wilderness and said, "Hey, go back and you're going to be blessed beyond measure." So verse 13 says, "She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me." This is what she said to God, because she, being rejected and abandoned, would have felt like, nobody sees me. Who sees me? First of all, I'm sleeping with somebody's husband, and now I'm rejected. I'm abandoned. Like, who am I? What am I doing? Oh my God, I can't believe. But she gave a name to God. And she named, in this situation, she said, she gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. That is why the well was called Bir Lalal Royal, which, tricky name. You can check that out in verse 14. It is still there between Kadesh and Bereb. Now, this is where the story turns as encouragement from me to you, because there are times when people might abandon you and might reject you, but God does see you. God sees you, and no matter the situation you're in, and in a sense, truth be told, even if it was your fault, God sees you. But it's so encouraging how she can give God a name and say, God, this Like, even when people do testimony service, they say, man, God is a keeper. You can't call God a keeper unless you've been through something where God had to keep you. And in this case, she had gone through something and uh, went out into the wilderness and is imagine being in the desert, pregnant with your mistress' child. You were a slave, and somebody said, sleep with my husband. And now I'm in the wilderness? Who sees me? Nobody cares about me. But verse 13 says, she gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. Little old me. That's amazing. So let's see. It's amazing how God intervened in that. I'm not sure, and I could be corrected, but it doesn't appear that she even prayed, but God intervened. There are times when you might not know the prayer to pray, but you might be going through something, and God hears you. God hears your cries. Even with the children of Israel, when they were in Egypt and they were still slaves, God heard the cries of his children. We do go through things, but God can hear your cries. God cares. He sees you as well. This is not just a story. This is the reality that God knows what you're going through. So let's go to the story of Joseph's journey from rejection to redemption, which is in Genesis 37 and 12. So we're still in the book of Genesis, chapter 37, verse 12. All right, 12 through 36. Like I said, it's going to be a lot of reading, but if I didn't read that whole story, you wouldn't be able to get, the meat of it. So, 12 through 36. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel and Joseph, and Israel said to Joseph, as you know, your brothers are grazing the flock near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them. Very well, he replied. So he said to him, go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me. Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, what are you looking for? He replied, I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing for their flock? They have moved from here, the man said. I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. So, first of all, I'm sent to come check on you, and I didn't find you where I went first. So I'm concerned. I'm like, hey, where are you guys at? I found a man. The man said, y'all went somewhere else. I went over there. And on my way there, y'all could see me coming, but you're plotting to kill me. Okay. Now, this is what they're saying to each other before the brother came. Here comes that dreamer. They said to each other, come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. So, rejection and abandonment. They're plotting it at this point. When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So Joseph came to his brothers. They stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and that was the coat of many colors, by the way. And they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from uh, Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood?" So, as it was revealed to me earlier this week, I was feeling as though they had some sort of sympathy. The only person that appeared to have some sort of sympathy was brother Reuben. But the rest of the brothers said, "Well, what is it gonna gain us if we kill him?" So they decided to sell him. Verse 27 says, "Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So then, when the Midianite merchant came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up off the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the cistern, like I said, Reuben was kind of trying to help the brother out. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped his robe in the blood. They dipped it in there to appear as though the brother Joseph got killed. They took the ordinate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it's your son's robe." The plot thickens, as they call it. He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, this is the father, and mourned his son for days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, even the ones that plotted it. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph to Egypt, to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. Now, like I said, that was a long story, but you have to understand the depth and the kind of like the effort that went into this level of rejection. Obviously, well, it's not obviously. I can't tell you obvious just yet. But in this story, it clearly states how essentially the brother had no reason to be abandoned. I mean, eventually, once they realize, hey, we're already in this mess, and we might as well not kill him, so let's just make some money off this. So they turned it around to have eventually to have a reason, but they were jealous. They were kind of like envious of the fact that Joseph he was having dreams and he had a coat of many colors that was gifted to him by his father. But that was the root of the abandonment and the rejection from their brothers. And sometimes this is kind of what people go through in real life. There are a lot of times when you're working somewhere and people see you're doing good and they're like, "Oh, who did he think he is? Like, he just got here, he got his little degrees and all that stuff, he got his little company car, and he's a teacher's pet, like, oh, he's always trying to prove something to somebody, look at him." And they kind of abandon you within your workplace. And sometimes it even happens at home. Sad. Even in this home, this is an old story, but even in modern day times, there's people that you're supposed to be, or you would feel as though you're on the same team. That's usually where the abandonment starts. It's somewhere where you think that this is somewhere I should have been secure. This is somewhere where I should have been backed. Like, you should have had my back, but you abandoned me. Like, This is where I should have had my foundation. Like, this is where I should have been. This is where I should have known. Like, I know I can call this person. Meanwhile, they're plotting. So, I want to. I'm just kind of speaking on the areas in which, first of all, you're either the. And I'm going to make up a word because I don't know the other word. But you're either the one abandoning, or you're the one that's being abandoned. And that's why I wanted to kind of lay the whole story, because you're either on one side of it. And man, I had another quote about victims, but I can't remember it. But you're either on either side of this. But it would be my encouragement for you to recognize, where are you in regards to this topic, and in regards to the two people we mentioned, which is Joseph and Hagar. It is important to know, we didn't get into the deeper part of the story of Joseph, but it is pivotal and important to know who your foundation is and who God is to you, and how is God working through these situations. Like in Hagar's situation, she was able to recognize that God saw her despite the situation that she was going through. And eventually in Joseph's story, you're able to see, let's see if I can go ahead and turn there. Because there's a couple of different points of the story, but let's see. Genesis chapter 41 and 39. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my place, and all of my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." First of all, Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers, but he eventually made it to the palace. He was sold. Let's see. I'm trying to get the specific names. In Genesis 37:36. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph. So first of all, he was sold to the Midianites, which was on a caravan full of other trading products at that time. He was sold to the Midianites, and then the Midianites sold him to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials in the captain of the guard. And in chapter 41, which that's still not the end of the story, that's why I said there's multiple areas we can go with this, but this is kind of showing how he was able to end up in the palace. Not only in the palace, but I'm going to read this one more time. Then Pharaoh, he made it all the way up to Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you," which that's a whole other story as well, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. This was recognition, from rejection to recognition. My God. "You shall be in charge of my palace." He was put in charge of the palace. "And all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." Boy, I tell you. So, you have to, like I said, I have to be sensitive, because I can't apply this to every single story, or every single experience that you might be going through or have gone through. But I do know God as a keeper. I know God as a keeper. And even in these two stories, both of them have recognized that God is a God who sees them and has a plan. In both of these stories, God had a bigger plan for the individual. For Hagar, for all of her children, it would be so numerous that they would no longer be able to count them. And in Joseph's case, where he's now put in charge of Egypt. Like there's usually a story or a outcome, but you either have to stick with it long enough to recognize and not curse God, because there's times when you would face these situations and you would curse God and be like, God, what you doing, man? Like, what am I going through? Sometimes people end up killing themselves depending on the level of what they've been going through. But I would encourage you to try and see and pray to God to see what is he up to, because there's so many stories in modern day times of when people have gone through abusive situations, and even recently I just saw a documentary about Kirk Franklin, and if you want to go check it out, it's called Father's Day on YouTube. But it was an encouraging and very I even got emotional. I mean, it was very empowering, the fact that Kirk Franklin is now in his 50s, and he has finally met his biological father. And it was encouraging because he had gone through so much for many years. And the part that I got from this documentary is that people judged Kirk Franklin for many years based off of the things that they thought they knew about him, when they didn't know the whole story. They didn't know he was homeless. They didn't know that he had been going through abandonment issues. There's certain responses that Kirk Franklin had in regards to what the general public could see, but nobody knew they were as results of the abandonment and the rejection that he was dealing with. Now, not making excuses, but when you don't know what God is doing and what God has done and what God has allowed for, you can jump on a bandwagon and try to judge a situation from the outside. But my encouragement to you is to not let what others think change how you go about pursuing what God wants in your life, because they don't know what God is doing for you. Just like in the story of Joseph, some could say, oh, look at him, he's arrested, he was sold into slavery, he must have been doing something bad. But it was a setup. And like I said, the story is even much more complex than that. But it was such a setup that they didn't know he was going to end up in the palace. They didn't know. They didn't even know. They could not even have imagined, because they were wanting to kill him. They were plotting to kill him in the beginning, and then he ended up in the palace. Like, come on. Now, I want to finish off by, I had much more, but I think it's important to, I think it's important to just sit and analyze, for the lack of a better word, just kind of like look at your life and be encouraged. I mentioned Kirk Franklin being 53 because a lot of times you would think that if he hasn't done it by now, he's not going to do it. And that's not true. It's not true. You don't know God's timing. And truth be told, this is a light statement, but God could have had a plan for your redemption or your outcome to have come. But if you were not submitted, you could have messed that up a long time ago. Who knows? I'm just being honest. But God could still work through our own situations. There's times when we get in the way. Like I said, truth be told, I gotta be honest, you could be the one that's doing the abandonment, or you could be the one that's being abandoned. So I'm keeping it, I'm keeping it open. You could be on either side. But I want to encourage you guys to just sit back and look at where you are in life and speak to God, pray to God. Keep your heart open enough to recognize that God is still working. Do not close your heart to say life is over. Life is not worth nothing. Oh, look at me. I don't have no house. I'm homeless. I don't have a car. I just got my car repoed. I just lost my job, lost my husband, lost my wife, lost my kids. My kids don't love me. This don't love me. That don't love me. I don't have this. I don't have that. You can do that for days, but that doesn't mean that God can't work through your situation. That doesn't mean God isn't working through this thing. Because he's still able to use stuff that doesn't make sense to you to accomplish the goal that he has. Who would have thought that a person being sold into slavery would end up in a palace? Things that God doesn't always have to make sense to you. That's why there's times when people talk about the plan of God and being like, I don't know what God doing. You may not need to know, because you might mess it up. And I'm talking to myself too. I'm walking by faith, not by sight. Because with the things that I see going around in my life, I'm saying this in faith. Who would have thought that this would turn into that? Come on, y'all. Come on. Come on. God is big. You don't put God in a box. The things that you think you know, you might be clueless about, but God is not blindsided by no situation. When things don't look like it's going good for you, God is not surprised. You can't catch God by surprise. He's working through all of these situations. So I just want to encourage you and to let you know that the feelings that you're going through in these situations are natural. Jesus went through feelings himself. Let's see if I can pull this up real quick. I was about to be finished, but I want you guys to recognize that Jesus himself went through feelings, because I don't just want to address the rejection and abandonment, but I want to address the fact that feelings are real and your feelings are likely valid, but God can still work through them. Let me see if I can find let's see, Matthew 27 and 46. Matthew chapter 27, verse 46. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came. Hold on, that's the wrong verse, but I'm going to keep reading. Okay. Darkness came over all the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lima. This is Arabic or Hebrew. I can't read it. But in other words, it says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus felt abandoned. He's asking God, you sent me here on earth to... Jesus knew, but I guess the weight and the level of what he had to go through, the sacrifice was real. He died for you and me, but he had to deal with his Father. It was still a real experience. I think a lot of times we glaze over, or we, as some people call, we pretty up the death on the cross. It looks pretty for us because we didn't have to go through nothing. But for Jesus, it was excruciating. Jesus himself felt, he had feelings of infirmity. He had feelings of like, Father, God, my God, why have you forsaken me? So feelings are real. Feelings are real. I just want to encourage you to dig in deep in regards to your relationship with God. God is real. He is there for you. He is there to speak to. You can ask him about your situation. You can ask him, hey, God, whatever you're doing. But let me see if I can even find the other verses. One more. Oh, man, we just read it tonight. Let's see. Y'all give me one more second and we'll end right after this. One more second, we'll end right after this. But this is good. But it was a story about when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane and he was with his disciples. He went up to pray. And he went to pray 3 times. And each time he said, Father, if there... Now this was before going to the cross. He was saying, God, if there is any other way, like, to make this happen, can we do this another way? He prayed on 3 different times. He went down and saw his disciples, they were sleeping. He went back a second time and he went down and saw them sleeping again, and then he came back a 3rd time. But each time he said, but you know what, even though he says, is there another way, but he always came back to say, well, but not my will, yours be done. That's God submitting, that's Jesus submitting his will to the Father God. And even on the cross, like I said, in Matthew 27:46, he's saying, Father God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus went through some pain for us, for our sins, and for the sins of the world. Even for the sins of people who may not receive him. Not just for who we call modern day Christians, for the sins of the world. So I want to encourage you, just even if there's one person watching, I want you to see the depth of what Jesus did for you on the cross. See that he himself had to go through feelings of abandonment and rejection. At the end of the day, there is an end result. There's a reason why God is allowing these things. Trust God. Pursue God. And when I say question God, I mean seek to know or to try to get knowledge of what God is doing. Because there's a time when you're going to recognize, okay, God, I see what you was doing. I see what you were doing. And I appreciate you. Like, there's, let me see. I'll pull this one last verse up. I did not intend. But this is honestly my very, let's see. Let's see, where's this thing at? Here we go. James chapter 1, verse 2 and 3. This is my favorite verse. James chapter 1, verse 2 through 5. It says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lack wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord in regards to understanding. Now, that verse, like I said, the very first one, it says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds." It sounds like a contradiction. How am I supposed to find or consider it pure joy when I face trials? But trust me, things in the kingdom don't necessarily line up. But God always, you will always recognize eventually what God is doing. He is a sovereign God. I believe we touched on that some weeks ago. He's sovereign. He's all-knowing. His plans are perfect. It might not feel perfect, but his plans are perfect. So I just want to encourage you guys to dig in deeper this week. As I said, I want you guys to recognize recognize what side of the abandonment and rejection are you on. Don't be the cause, at least, not for the sake of causing affliction on people's lives or causing pain, because there's other teachings on being peaceful with people around you or just being the cause of joy. But know that God might be working through some of these things. So I just want to thank you guys for being here. I want you guys to share this with anybody who might be dealing with any pain or suffering or just not knowing what's going on in their life right now. I just want you to share this as a word of encouragement, to know that God is God. Beside him, there's no other. Like, he's a perfect God, and he's a good keeper. He's a good God. And he can give you peace in the middle of whatever situation you're going through. So until next week, I'll see you guys soon. I love you. Bye-bye.